Hello there. This is Jen T. Grace, founder of Publish Your Purpose, and I am here today for a book launch conversation with Melissa. We're talking about your book, Beyond the Mic Drop: How Stories Shift Culture, Power, and Policy. Excuse me. Here's your beautiful, beautiful book. First, how are you feeling? Just the fact that your book is out there.
Yeah. Hi, Jen. Thanks so much for having me. I feel good. I feel relieved. I feel more relaxed than I have in about 3 months. And I feel excited. I'm hearing positive responses from people in my community and network that have read it so far. A lot of them are friends, so we'll see what strangers think as well. But it's done pretty well. I think there's no way to know exactly how many sales I've gotten either, and that's not actually the most important thing to me, but it's been number one under human rights in Kindle twice. It was at that point during the pre-order and just last week. And I've been hearing a lot of like positive feedback, and people have been saying it's really helping them tap into their own voice and their story. And so I feel really good that it's in the world, that I've given birth to it, and
Yes.
that it's here.
Yeah, it's here, and now it's got a very long life to live ahead of itself. So can we actually let's start just talking about a little bit about your background and kind of how you show up in the world.
Sure. So my background is in journalism. I started my career many, many, many moons ago as a producer for CNN, doing business news in New York. And then I also did entertainment news in LA, which wasn't really news, but it was definitely fun. That was a very fun chapter. I kind of lost my soul doing the entertainment news thing when the focus became very gossip oriented, and paparazzi were exceptionally crazy at that time, chasing young starlets around town. And I just thought it was kind of abusive. And I had to check myself and say, is this really the kind of storytelling you want to be doing? And no, it wasn't. The recession hit. I lost my job. I was living on my best friend's couch. I started writing about technology and social impact. That's when tech became important to me. I started to geek out a little bit. I was only earning $15 per blog post, and I thought, I'm never going to make it. Am I ever going to be not broke again? And a friend of mine said, you really need to start looking at yourself differently, and all of your skills as a communicator and storyteller and your voice can be useful to organizations, not just as public relations, but as a storyteller internally and externally. So I started my own business, and I really wanted to focus on storytelling around human rights, humanitarian issues, social impact, sustainability. And yeah, it kind of really grew from there. I ended up meeting one of my heroes, Peter Gabriel, the musician and legendary activist, and we became co-founders, lived in London, and then I traveled around the world. And a lot of my book is based on stories that I accumulated over time through those travels about storytelling and about the remarkable people that I met along the way.
Yeah, I love your background is so kind of there's such a diversity to the background and such a core of the things that light you up and the things that you've talked about. And I love that, that's kind of the framework of your book and the core of your book. So can we talk a little bit about your book? Because the
Yeah.
subtitle is how our stories shift culture, policy, power, and policy. So what does that mean?
Yeah, so it's a big statement for sure. I like big, bold statements. So what I mean by that is our stories, our personal stories, individual stories, stories collective from communities, they have so much more muscle and force than we actually give them credit for. And I think most people in the world understand that stories drive us, that stories are what connect us, that stories are why people go to the movies. Songs are made of storytelling. Most people understand that. And the word storytelling itself has been kind of co-opted in a way over the years, the last 10, 15 years by business. But it's because of the beauty of it, because it's the one thing that lives on when everything else fades. And I view stories as the scaffolding or the building blocks of narratives. Sometimes narrative and stories are interchangeable. I don't want to get into an argument about semantics, but I really view stories as the building blocks, instances and human examples that build larger narratives about society or about global issues, our own narratives about who we are and who we're able to become in the world. And when I look at some of the systems that we're operating on, especially now when we're in a time where there's wars happening, there's so much injustice around the world, and particularly the United States is going through some changes that it's that it hasn't faced. And so I wanted to do a book that really tapped into the innate power of story itself, not just as a skill or a craft or a marketing strategy, but as a power, as a human power. And I think a lot of people who do personal development, right, who learn how to rewrite their story, rewrite their narrative, they're familiar with that concept. But I think that if we learn how to rewrite those stories for ourselves, for our communities, and for movements, those stories can rebuild and reshift narratives. And when I think of the systems, again, back to the systems we're operating on, I'm kind of going all over the place, but think about our capital system, some of our government systems, healthcare system, education, financial systems, these extractive systems. A lot of us just grew up into them, right? We weren't around when they were originated. And we're kind of told that that's just the way it is. This is how society operates. This is how the world works. There's no changing it. Sometimes things will happen like the pandemic or some kind of massive global issue. And we'll start to think, oh, we need to redesign these systems that they're more equitable. And then nothing changes, right? Nothing changes. Things go back to the way they were. But it really comes down to the people and our stories. If we can shift our own stories and push stories of importance and resilience about our communities, I think we have more power through story to shift narrative and systems than we give ourselves credit for. And it was really important to me to write this book and to publish it before midterm elections happen. They're happening in November, which is really right around the corner. I think we're going to see some really strange, scary things, especially on the internet. I think we're going to see some really bizarre AI slop, political AI slop, fraud, whatever. There's so much corruption happening now in our government and with companies, and people, the justice and democracy is really falling on the people. And it makes me angry that it's falling on us. But it also gives me so much hope for the future because people are rising to the occasion. And the more we see people use their voices and promote their stories, just look at what happened in Minnesota, right? With the ICE raids and the people actually being able to ultimately ICE kind of fading down. They're still there, they're still present, and there's still things happening. But the fact that Metro surge was able to calm down a little bit, that was because of the people and the stories. And so, I don't know if I'm answering your question. I'm kind of just going all over the place, but yeah, I just think people, stories are what make the world go round. It's in the media, it's in the news. And people love people. People love people. I think we forget that. And people love people. We love hearing one another's stories. And so as cliche as the importance of storytelling and narrative can be sometimes, at least in my world, because I work in media and because I've been a journalist and a communication strategist, and because there have been so many books written about storytelling, for a second I thought, do I really want to do this? There have been so many books written about storytelling, great ones, not so great ones. There have been TED Talks about it. I thought, how am I going to make this different? And then I stopped and said, fine, there have been a lot of books written about storytelling, but there hasn't been one written by you yet. And no one's going to bring the perspective or the exact experiences that I bring to that conversation.
Which is such a powerful statement to recognize, because so often that lack of awareness and lack of knowledge is exactly the reason why someone doesn't pursue writing the book in the first place. So I love that you were like, I don't like, obviously you still found a unique angle. And because storytelling, like you said, is just it's a monster of a topic, and you were still able to find your lane where you belong. And even if you did copy kind of someone else's kind of storytelling book structure, anything, it still would be unique because it's from you and your lived experience and your perspective. So I love that you had that kind of awareness throughout the process and didn't allow that to stop you from proceeding.
Yeah, thank you for that. There was a moment at my pre-launch book party. I had a pre-launch book party at my friend Susan McPherson's in Brooklyn Heights. It was the day before I did a book signing on this incredible boat called Peace Boat at the Brooklyn Heights launch. On Susan's deck, we did a short Q&A and we talked about the same topic. And someone said, why storytelling? And I shared with the audience the same thing I just shared with you. Well, there was a moment where I thought, do you want to write about this? It's been covered so many times. And then I said, yes, because it hasn't been done by me yet. And so many people in the audience went, oh yeah. Like you could hear them just sigh like, It's like, yeah, no, just because it's been done doesn't mean it hasn't been done by me yet. So why shouldn't I attempt it? And it just felt so good to hear and feel that resonate with people,
Yeah.
because people do a lot have. I talk to so many people who have ideas for books, and they're just
Mhm.
like, well, I don't know, I don't have the time, or it's kind of been done, and I don't know how to make
Mhm.
it different. And so we have
Yeah.
to remember our individuality, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And how would you say, because I feel like you and I were connected in maybe 10 years ago. I think, is it possible that it was
I
as
think
far
it's
as back?
more. I think
Okay.
it's like at least 15. It was Melinda. No, it's a woman. She wrote a book called Inclusion. Do you know the author I'm talking about? She published it
Oh,
with you.
like Jen Brown?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I met her at a diversity and inclusion tech event, and she gave a wonderful talk, and we
Mhm.
connected. I only met her that one time, and she gave me a
Mhm.
copy of her book, and she told me
Mhm.
about Publish Your Purpose. And I reached out to you because I had a book idea at the
Yeah.
time,
Yep.
and I ended up having a literary agent, and we did a whole proposal together,
Mhm.
and the proposal was really contrived and didn't really feel like me, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
wanted me to make the book into like a self-help book,
Mhm.
because books about social impact weren't selling, but they
Mhm.
thought I had really incredible stories from my travels. The book at
Mhm.
that time was about technology and the next wave of global activism. Some of the
Mm.
stories in there are in this book, but I
Yeah.
did a lot of living in the last 15 years, so there's
Yeah.
many more stories, but it
Mhm.
was similar in concept. The book about technology and global activism was similar in that I extracted a lot of lessons from my travels around the world.
Yeah.
But ultimately that it didn't work. I remember my agent sent me a lot of really beautiful glowing rejections
Mhm.
from some of the big publishing houses.
Yep.
She would forward me the email so I would see what the publishers
Yeah.
would say. And they were so kind and gracious, and they said,
Yeah.
"Oh wow, this is a phenomenal topic, and Melissa seems like a really powerful voice on this subject matter. But
Mhm.
this topic is not selling well commercially, and we thought it
Yeah.
would, and it's not, and so we're not doing this right now."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so
Yeah.
what influence did that have? Because the root of my question is thinking like you've had this book in you for a while. And so how you constructed it and how it came out, like it's very much relevant to today in 2026. But even going back to 10 years ago, like how has the idea kind of shifted and morphed into something, into what it is today?
I think the idea started to evolve when I started working in climate. I had put the book idea to bed. I knew someday I would write a book.
Mhm.
After I got all of those rejections, I just stopped focusing on writing a book, and I was
Mhm.
running my business. I was doing more traveling. I was distracted. And well, I was focused, but also distracted, just
Mhm.
living life. And I still wanted to do a book. I remember being at an event in Los Angeles. It was an environmental focused event, and something about one of the sessions or meeting someone who was passing out books of her own, I just thought, you know what? That idea I had 10 to 15 years ago, I think I can revive and evolve that idea and
Mhm.
apply more recent things that I've learned about storytelling as a journalist and as a traveler, apply them to it. But I still think that there's something there. So it was really, I think, just putting it to bed for a while, and then over time shifting my focus to climate, which is still very integrated with social impact. It's not like I
Mhm.
left broad social impact. I just started
Sure.
connecting the dots to climate more.
Mhm.
And it was doing that, and um it was just something like 2 years ago. It started to crystallize more to me that it would be a book about storytelling rather than making the book specifically about tech or
Mhm.
specifically about certain kinds of activism or specifically
Mhm.
about climate. I thought, what is the one thing that I've done my entire career or
Mhm.
my entire life as soon as I was able to read a book. Even before I could read, I was doing story time with kids my own age and picking up the book and acting like I knew how to read and reading them stories. And so it's just something that I've always loved to do. I love
Yeah.
having a microphone in my hand. And it started to just really take shape the last 2 years. And then when Trump was elected, that's when I realized, you know what, I really want to accelerate the publishing date.
Mhm.
And that's when I emailed you.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and here we are, which is incredible. And I wanna ask you about your journey in writing, because especially what we were just talking about before of, kind of having that self-awareness of that, a book is uniquely different specifically just by the author, right? And so I know that you had some revelations and some self-reflections and all of those wonderful things that happen in the writing process. And I wanted to see if you can just kind of elaborate a little bit, because I think just even what you were sharing before we went live, I feel like there's so much juicy value in that for
Yeah.
someone who might be thinking about this themselves.
Yeah. You know what? I actually enjoyed the book writing process more than I thought. I thought I was going to hate
Mhm.
myself the entire time. I didn't hate myself while I was writing. It was more afterwards when I was planning all the events and getting
Mhm.
freaked out that I wasn't doing enough to promote it. But I learned so much about myself through the writing process. I learned one, I think this is just a lesson that I learned over and over, just how blessed and privileged I am to have lived the life I have so far. Some
Mhm.
of the places I've been, some of the travels I've been fortunate enough to experience are out of this world. And, I'm not super wealthy, not wealthy at all. I wouldn't say that I was able to do these things on big budgets, but I was able to go to 75 plus countries in a span of 3 years when I was living in London because I had so much access. It was so easy to get around, and
Mhm.
I was able to do travel hacks. I mean, I slept on couches. I was able to tap into communities that were so welcoming all over
Mhm.
the world, from Asia to the Middle East to South Africa. And I just went. I went where the adventure or the story was. I
Mm.
wasn't getting paid to do it. I was working remotely. I was consulting as a communication strategist and still doing
Mhm.
some freelance writing. At the time, I was doing my Forbes Women column and
Mhm.
writing about incredible women entrepreneurs around the world. But even though I knew in many ways how special those experiences were, as I was writing the book, I looked back at some of those moments and thought, God, I wish I was even more present. Like, I
Mm.
thought I was present at the time, but I am
Yeah.
positive I was probably distracted over some guy, over some over some deadline,
Yeah.
over some issue that wasn't going exactly the way I wanted it to, or something not happening as fast as I wanted it to. It just made me realize how presence is everything. And that,
Mhm.
again, I think is a kind of a trite cliche, but
Mhm.
that's because it's true. And writing this book made me so grateful for everything that I've experienced and lived so far, and so excited for what's ahead. And yeah, and I also realized through writing this book that I have a lot more wisdom than I've ever
Mm.
given myself credit for.
Mhm. Mhm. Do you think that going to like down the path of the present side of things, do you think that even in your acknowledgement that you didn't have, like, you may not have been as present as you would have liked to be at the time, do you think that there's any, I don't know how to even ask the question in my mind, is there any way in which you became more present to what was happening as you were retelling it?
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah, there were definitely moments when I was writing the book where I cried because I
Mhm.
started to feel the magnitude of how incredible some of the moments were.
Oh, wow.
I there's a whole chapter in the book on Puerto Rico. Well, some of
Mhm.
the chapters on South Africa, and then I go into when I was living in Puerto Rico, because the two places were very different culturally and on different parts of the planet. The community resilience and ingenuity to
Mhm.
me were very similar.
Mm.
And I lived in Puerto Rico for 3 years. By my 3rd year, the island just started to feel too small to me,
Mm.
but it was the perfect place to land in 2019. I moved there about 6 months before COVID hit,
Oh, wow.
and that's when I was meeting all these incredible farmers and people working on food sovereignty, and
Mhm.
just dealing with the health issues with everything going on with COVID, trying to create masks
Mhm.
and do things for people that were really getting hit hard by the pandemic.
Mhm.
And it made me, again, so grateful for meeting those people, but also missing that kind of, just like, in a nostalgic way, sort of, but just like, oh man, that was such a beautiful time.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I mean, I relived some of those experiences, which
Mhm.
was so beautiful. And I also, because I was looking at them from a different angle, from now, it's
Mhm.
been years since I lived there, since
Yeah.
I've lived in any of those countries, since I've lived in the Middle East, since I've lived in a lot of the places that I talk about in the book. I
Yeah.
now look at it with more of it's funny because it's like a more overarching lens. There's more of a
Mhm.
macro view, but then also
Mhm.
I'm going when I was really trying to remember how things felt, I just sit and meditate with it and really focus on specifics. And there were times like, God, I wish I'd taken video of that, or why didn't I write that down?
Yeah.
But the things that stayed with me are in me still, and I was able to also put some of them in the book. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if
Yeah.
I answered your question
Yeah,
or not.
yeah,
Did I
absolutely.
did I learn about presence while writing the book?
Yeah. I think so, and because I think that that's the a beauty of writing a book is that you can relive the experiences or the knowledge or the wisdom or whatever the thing is simply by trying to figure out how to take it from your own perspective and write it in a way that can actually resonate with somebody else. I think that's the to me, I think that's the hard part is because you can tell a story, but are you telling it in a way that people are going to be able to take action on it if that's what the goal is, or to feel some emotion if that's what the goal is? And I think that's what's beautiful about your background as a journalist, right? Like you have like already you are so far ahead of probably the average person who might be writing a book just because you have the
Yeah.
that deep skill set.
I remember you telling me that when we started the process. I remember you saying, "Well, we think because, because you have such a strong writing background, you could just do the developmental edit." And I was like, because that was what I was the most scared of,
Yeah.
the developmental edit, the structure. That to me was the
Yeah.
most challenging. Just figure
Yeah.
out what is the order of this. And I changed it
Mhm.
multiple times. I
Mhm.
wrote 2 additional chapters after I thought I was done. I remember when I turned in a draft to Mina, and my incredible project manager. I can't say enough good things about Mina.
Mhm.
I turned in a draft and she said, we just noticed that there's 2 extra chapters in here because I didn't tell her. I didn't tell
Yeah.
her that I had done that. And I said, oh yeah, I just felt like the middle needed another chapter and the end
Mhm.
needed
Mhm.
a final chapter on where we
Yeah.
go from here. The final chapter is on world building.
Mhm.
How do we use story to build new worlds? And so that elongated the process. There were many things that I did that elongated the process. And
Mhm.
so there were moments too when Mina would say, do you want to do this? This will affect the timeline here and there. But it
Mhm.
was just always, it's your choice, right? Because it's
Mhm.
ultimately, this is why I went with a hybrid publisher. This is why I went with your organization because of that. And it always came down to me thinking, I know that this is going to elongate the process, but if it doesn't turn out the way that I want it to, I'm only going to have myself to blame.
Mhm.
And I have this choice. I have this choice to do it the way I think it should be done.
Yeah.
So having the book come out in June, a month before I start classes at Harvard,
Mhm.
wasn't the most um, ideal scenario
Yeah.
just because it's been a lot of handling a lot of details all at once. But it also has worked out really well. I was able to
Mhm.
just relax at home these next 2 weeks,
Mhm.
following up with people to leave reviews. I'm going to be
Mhm.
sending out another batch of books to some colleagues and some
That's
podcasters
great.
and journalists. And then
Mhm.
I start school, and I'm going to be bringing a lot of books with me to Harvard. I'm going to be organizing events at Harvard.
Yeah.
I will be promoting the book hard there.
Yeah.
I will be
Yeah.
passing it out to students and to professors.
Yeah. Yeah, which is the best part about a book is that you have something tangible that you can hand somebody.
Yeah.
There's so many benefits of books and and any of the doom predictions of, books going away and all that it's like there's still always going to be a function for a book always.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
think that tangible just being able to hand it to a professor or to a fellow student to be like, yeah, here, and then they get and there's like such a level of intimacy that these people who you are now surrounding yourself with now can know about you.
Exactly, exactly. And I have a sticker that you sent me on my laptop now, which I can't show you because I'm using my laptop to talk to you. But on the back of my MacBook, I've got the "Ask Me About My Book" sticker.
Oh, this one perhaps.
Yes. And
Yeah.
thank you for the plaque. The plaque is over there.
Oh,
I didn't know
good.
that you were doing that, and I got a UPS email saying your plaque's arrived. I'm like, I didn't order a plaque. What is this? And then
Mhm.
I opened it, so it was a very sweet surprise.
Yeah, we like to do it as a little surprise at the end of it.
Yeah,
Because it's like it's one of those things that like you might be looking at your books on the shelf, you might have them in your car, they're in your purse, they're literally everywhere. But there's something about seeing it like on a wall or wherever you decide to kind of position it to just remind you of a very big effort that you undertook and the impact that is just kind of like out there waiting to be seen, which is really exciting.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's very exciting. It's I always knew, I think before I even started talking to publishers 15 years ago about my original book idea, I think I've always known that there was a book or many books inside me. And now that this one is out, like I said, now that I've given birth to it, I feel so much more confident
Mhm.
and secure and self-assured in the idea of doing more books. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because some authors I've spoken to, some friends of mine who've published books, after they were done with their book, they have no desire to write another book, maybe ever, or 10 years from
Mhm.
now, just because it took so much out of them. And I think
Yeah.
some of it might have been the subject matter.
Mhm.
Some friends of mine, some really phenomenal writers did really heavy subject matter focused on trauma and
Mhm.
addressing really deep, dark issues. And
Mhm.
with my book, I talk about some serious things for sure, because it's very focused on justice and democracy and using story to promote those things. But I didn't feel like heavy afterwards.
Yeah.
And especially now I feel so light because it's
Mhm.
done and because it's out
Mhm.
there and because I'm excited to start school.
Yeah.
So it doing your first book, I think, is a really important doing, even if it's your last, even if your first book is
Mhm.
your last, is such an important milestone. And but I, like I said, I think doing this one and working with you and your team, I feel so prepared to do
Mhm.
another one.
Yeah.
And I will
Yeah.
do things somewhat differently.
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
be more organized. I will be a bit more organized and just plan ahead a bit better.
Mhm. I
Yeah.
think that's the beautiful thing if when people do pursue further, other books in the future is that you do learn so much about the process and, I don't think that it gets easier per se, but you know what to expect. You can almost predict the next thing. You get that level of self-awareness to know where you're going to get stuck in the process. And so it really is a confidence boost to kind of make it through this process. And even for people who might have written a manuscript and they haven't actually published it yet, there's still something super rewarding and valuable about even having that document just digitally living on your computer, because that alone is a Herculean effort in itself.
Absolutely. Having
Mhm.
just the whole thing, having one piece
Mhm.
is massive, because it's one thing to write a 500 word article, 1,000 words. So I can whip out 1,000, 2,000 words very easily.
Mhm.
Um, but a book is a whole nother animal.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and I suppose some people, it depends though, if you have like a certain formula in mind, with with Beyond the Mic Drop, I I definitely wanted to have each section or each chapter have sections at the end that could provide tools and reflections and questions for people as they start to decide what stories they want to tell, or how they want to develop their voice. I didn't want it to be a memoir. A few people said, "Oh, it should be a memoir. You have so many fascinating stories." I'm like, nobody wants to read my memoir. Like, nobody's gonna, I'm not Michelle Obama. No one is gonna pay to read my memoir. I mean, I have had some incredible experiences, right? But I just felt like I wanted this to be for people,
Mhm.
even if it just reaches 10 to 20 people who are on the cusp of telling a story about their life,
Mhm.
or about something that they learned about their community, or something they learned about the
Yeah.
world and the way it could work differently. Even if it just helps a few people think, you know what, this is it. This is the message I needed to write my book, or to do my podcast, or to get on Instagram, or whatever it is. It
Mhm.
just, um, that's the most important thing to me. So
Yeah. Well, as we're kind of wrapping up, if you were to look to the future, it's 3 months, 6 months, whatever range from now, and someone walks up to you, you're, on the stage speaking, doing your thing, holding your microphone, and they come up and they tell you that your book did something for them. What are you hoping that something is?
I'm hoping that it encouraged them to tell their story, to
Mm.
tell other people's stories, to grab the mic,
Mhm.
to pass the
Mhm.
mic. Something that came up at a conference I spoke at. It was the first conference where I mentioned the book. The book was not published yet. Pre-order links weren't even live yet, but that time
Mhm.
was approaching. And I used the metaphor of the microphone quite a bit. And
Mhm.
at the end, people came up to me and said, a few people, they said, the microphone language you're using is giving us a new vernacular for
Mm.
sharing stories and for promoting people and for giving people a platform. There's a chapter in the book called "The Stage is Not the Table." I
Mm.
don't know if you got to see that one, but it's all about how some people can be invited to a stage, and then your event or your global convening can look so diverse and so
Mhm.
focused on diversity and equity. And at the end, though, the decision making has nothing to do with those people that are being paraded around.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think just encouraging people to share their voice, to tell their story, to understand how big their voice is, even if it's in a small room, and
Mhm.
that you don't need to be famous or have a massive following on social media to make a difference in other people's lives.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know, you don't need to have a massive audience to harness a story that could be used to shift policy. Maybe
Mm.
you just need that one congresswoman or congressman in the
Yeah.
room, or that one legislator, that one councilman, you know? And so it's just, again, to never, I want people to never underestimate the power of their
Mhm.
voice and their story.
Mhm. Mhm. I love all of that so much. And I love that you just kind of said that like platform size is not necessarily the equivalent of impact, because I think that's really
Yeah.
important for people to know, because I think a lot of times, especially with traditional publishing, I think traditional publishing wants you to believe that that's how it works, when the reality is not that at all. You can have a very small following of people or no following at all and still make a significant impact on this world.
Yeah, I mean, social media plays tricks with our minds in so
Mhm.
many ways, and that's a whole nother
Mhm.
conversation. And obviously, I think any writer or artist wants their work to be seen.
Mhm.
And I mean, not all, some just do it really for themselves or for
Mhm.
just their own tight-knit group, which I
Yeah.
think is a very beautiful, elegant thing in itself. But for those of us who are putting a book into the world, a film, a TV show, a piece of poetry, whatever it is, and we do want it to be seen because we want to share with people and we hope it touches them in some way, it's very easy to think, oh, if it doesn't hit a certain number of views or followers,
Mhm.
purchases, then it's not relevant. But again, I just think that that's such a dangerous and false
Mhm.
narrative to operate under,
Mhm.
because even if it just reached 1 to 5 people,
Mhm.
what if they were the biggest decision makers in the world, right? What if you dropped your book on an airplane and the next person to sit in that seat was,
Yeah.
the president of a country? You just
Yeah,
never know. You never
it's
know
true.
what's gonna happen. And
Mhm.
I think our stories always find the right audience.
Mhm. Mhm. I agree.
Not to get too
And
woo, but
yeah, no, I completely agree. And your book is going to help people figure that part out too, which is amazing and incredible. And I'm so excited. Again, here's what this beautiful book looks like beyond the mic drop. The book is available wherever you would like to purchase a book. Is there any place in particular? Obviously, for those who are watching us, it's your website is scrolling along the bottom. But is there any other place that you'd prefer people to connect with you, follow you, etc.?
My website is great, and then you can also order the book through the book page, all the different links for Amazon, Kindle, Barnes& and Noble, Books A Million. I just saw that it's available on Walmart now and The Strand, which
Nice.
is my favorite bookstore in the world. But in terms of connecting me, through my website, through my Instagram, which is just at Melissa Rowley, or LinkedIn are probably the best places, and I'm very
Amazing.
active on both of those.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time, Melissa. I'm so happy to see that the book is finally here, and I cannot wait to see what happens in the next, week, 10 years, 20 years,
Me
lifetime.
too.